My opponent poses the question, are African Americans Nagas? First off, what is Naga? Naga is a cultural phenomenon that's found across Africa and the world that we, a group of African Americans, identify with. Here are some examples of Naga titles, surnames, and cultural concepts in West Africa in their various forms. Titles and surnames. Naga, NGA, Igbo, Nigeria, a title of respect for elders or leaders. Naga Labi, in the Congo, Angola, and DRC, a surname and title of nobility. Ngala, Yoruba, Nigeria, a surname and title of royalty. Nagaiden, Fulani, West Africa, a surname and title of Islamic scholars. Cultural concepts. Naga, Igbo, Nigeria, refers to ancestral spirits and the concept of Ndichi, ancestral wisdom. Naga lingua, Congo, Angola, and DRC, a concept of spiritual power and ancestral energy. Naga Ngala, Yoruba, Nigeria, a concept of transformation and spiritual growth. And Naga Nadu, Fulani, West Africa, a concept of spiritual guidance and divine wisdom. Sources. J.D. Sapir, 1975, African Names and Naming Practices from Oxford University Press. J.S. Mbiti, 1969, African Religions and Philosophy from Praga. K. Nketia, 74, The African Aesthetic in Music, General Music Publishing. M.J. Herkovich in 1958, The Myth of the Negro Past, Beacon Press. Identifying as Naga for us is a powerful way to reclaim and honor our shared cultural heritage. By embracing this common thread, we're acknowledging the historical and cultural ties that bind our ancestral cultures together. Shared cultural heritage. The Naga cultural identity transcends specific ethnic or national boundaries, speaking to a broader African diasporic experience. By identifying as Naga, we're recognizing the shared values, traditions, and histories that have been passed down through generations, ancestral connection. Embracing the Naga identity is also a way to connect with our ancestors and honor their legacies. By reclaiming this shared cultural heritage, we're strengthening our ties to the past and forging a sense of continuity with our ancestral roots. Cultural revitalization. Identifying as Naga can also be seen as an act of cultural revitalization. By embracing this shared cultural identity, we're helping to preserve and promote the rich cultural heritage of our ancestors. This can be a powerful way to counteract the effects of cultural erasure and historical trauma. Sources from M.J. Herkovich again, J.S. Mbiti, and K. Nkita. Our identification as Naga is a testament to the resilience and richness of African diasporic cultures. By embracing this shared cultural heritage, we're helping to forge a sense of community and connection among people of African descent. The transatlantic slave trade uprooted millions. During the transatlantic slave trade, the 15th and 19th centuries, various African tribes and ethnic groups were captured and forcibly taken to the Americas. Here's an expanded overview of specific African tribes and regions affected. West Africa, the Yoruba, Nigeria, and Benin. Many Yoruba people were captured and taken to the Americas, particularly to Cuba, Brazil, and the southern United States. The Igbo of Nigeria. Igbo people were taken to the Americas, mainly to the Caribbean and the southern United States. The Akan of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. Akan people, including the Ashanti and Fante, were captured and taken to the Americas, particularly to the Caribbean and Brazil. The Wolof from Senegal and the Gambia. Wolof people were taken to the Americas, mainly to the Caribbean and Brazil. Fulani, West Africa. Fulani people were taken to the Americas, mainly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Hausa, West Africa. Hausa people were captured and taken to the Americas, particularly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Mande, West Africa. Mande people, including the Bambara and Mandinka, were taken to the Americas, mainly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Gur from Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Togo. Gur people, including the Mosi and the Goma, were captured and taken to the Americas. Gadami of Ghana and Togo. Gadami people were taken to the Americas, mainly to the Caribbean and Brazil, Central Africa, Congo, Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Republic of Congo. Congo people were captured and taken to the Americas, particularly to Brazil, the Caribbean, and the southern United States. Mbundu, Angola. Mbundu people were taken to the Americas, mainly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Luba, Democratic Republic of the Congo. Luba people were captured and taken to the Americas, particularly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Lunda, Angola, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Zambia. Lunda people were taken to the Americas, mainly to Brazil and the Caribbean. East Africa, Makande from Mozambique and Tanzania. Makande people were taken to the Americas, mainly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Zulu of South Africa. Although fewer in number, some Zulu people were captured and taken to the Americas, particularly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Swahili of Tanzania and Kenya. Swahili people were taken to the Americas, mainly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Other African groups. Bamum of Cameroon. Bamum people were captured and taken to the Americas, particularly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Bakongo, Angola, and Democratic Republic of Congo. Bakongo people were taken to the Americas, mainly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Ewe, Ghana, and Togo. Ewe people were captured and taken to the Americas, particularly to Brazil and the Caribbean. Please note that these ethnic groups were not mutually exclusive, and many enslaved Africans were from mixed or complex ethnic backgrounds. Additionally, the transatlantic slave trade was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that involved various African societies, European colonizers, and American slave owners. The sources of P.E. Lovejoy from 2012, Transformation and Slavery, A History of Slavery in Africa. P. Manning from 1990, Slavery in African Life, Occidental, Oriental, and African Slave Trades from Cambridge University Press. J. Thornton in 1992, Africa and Africans and the Making of the Atlantic World from 1400 to 1680, Cambridge University Press. The transatlantic slave trade to Louisiana. It's a historical marker mentioning the tribes that were affected and brought to Louisiana. And you can see there were Wolof, Bambara, Mandingo, Fulbe, Nord, Ganga, Kizzy, Sasu, Minu, Fan, Yoruba, Chamba, Hausa, Igbo, Ibibio, Congo, Angola, Makwa, and members of many other nations were deported from Africa to Louisiana. The transatlantic slave trade had a profound impact on African Americans, shaping their ancestry, culture, and experiences. Here are some key ways in which the slave trade relates to African Americans. Ancestral heritage. Diverse ancestral roots. African Americans have ancestral roots from various West, Central, and East African ethnic groups, including those mentioned earlier: Ego, Yoruba, Igbo, Akan, and Congo. Complex ethnic identities. Number 2, enslaved Africans were often forcibly assimilated into new ethnic identities, leading to complex and multifaceted ancestral heritage. Cultural retention. 1. African cultural influences. African Americans retain many cultural practices, traditions, and values from their African ancestors, such as music, dance, art, and spiritual practices. 2. Creolization and syncretism. Enslaved Africans blended their cultural practices with those of European colonizers and indigenous Americans, resulting in a unique Creole culture. Historical trauma and resilience. Intergenerational trauma. The transatlantic slave trade inflicted profound trauma on enslaved Africans and their descendants, with lasting impacts on mental health, family structures, and common dynamics. 2. Resilience and resistance. African Americans developed strategies to resist oppression, preserve their cultural heritage, and fight for freedom and equality. Contemporary implications, racial identity and belonging. African Americans continue to navigate the complex questions of racial identity, belonging, and cultural heritage. Social justice and equity. The legacy of the transatlantic slave trade continues to shape social justice movements with African Americans advocating for equity, equality, and reparations. By understanding the historical context of the transatlantic slave trade and its impact on African Americans, we can better appreciate the complexities of African American identity, culture, and experiences. Here are the sources I drew from: P.E. Lovejoy, P. Manning, J. Thornton, J.E. Holloway, M.A. Gomez. Y'all can pause to read those sources. Many of them are already covered. Okay. Nganga, spiritual healer, and Ikenga. Ikenga is found among the Igbo, and Nganga is found from West Africa to Central Africa all the way to South Africa, and it is spiritual healers. This is a concept from distinct African cultures that both incorporate the term Naga or Nga, however you want to pronounce that. The term Naga has various meanings and significance across different African cultures. Here's an overview of its different variations and their connections to the cultures of the tribes I mentioned earlier. Variations of Naga. Naga, Igbo. In Igbo culture, Naga means assembly or gathering. It also used as a suffix in titles and surnames indicating a connection to a particular group or community. Naga in Yoruba. In Yoruba culture, Naga is a prefix meaning born to or descendant of. It's often used in names to indicate lineage or ancestry. 3. Anga in Congo. In Congo culture, Anga refers to a spiritual leader or healer. It's also used as a title for respected community leaders. Naga in the Fulani. In Fulani culture, Naga means cow or cattle. It's often used in names and titles related to cattle herding or ownership. Naga in Luba. In Luba culture, Naga refers to a sacred object or symbol. It's often used in names and titles related to spiritual leadership or ritual practices. Titles and surnames containing Naga. 1. Igbo, Naga 4, Nagadi, Nagakuru, Nagalaba. And 2. Yoruba, Nagasanya, Nagadiri, Nagakuru, Nagalori. 3. Congo, Anga Ngoma, Anga Mwanga, Anga Nkisi. 4. Fulani, Nagaede, Nagari, Nagaya, Nagawara. 5. Luba, Nagazambi, Nagamwana, Nagaluba, Naga Kifwibi. Here are more examples of different forms of Naga used in various African cultures. Igbo culture, Naga, assembly or gathering. Nagadi, title for respected elder. Nagalaba, surname indicating leadership or authority. Nagakuru, title for a skilled craftsman. Nagaba, surname indicating strength or bravery. Yoruba culture, Naga, born to, descendant of. Nagasanya, surname indicating royalty or nobility. Nagadiri, title for a respected priest. Nagakuru, surname indicating wisdom or knowledge. Nagalori, title for a skilled musician. Congo, Anga, spiritual leader or healer. Naga Ngulu, surname indicating spiritual power. Naganzi, title for a skilled diviner. Nagoma, surname indicating musical or artistic talent. Fulani culture, Naga, cow or cattle. Nagaido, surname indicating cattle ownership. Nagari, title for a skilled cattle herder. Nagaya, surname indicating wealth or prosperity. Nagawara, title for a respected elder. Luba culture, Naga, sacred object or symbol. Nagazambi, title for the respected spiritual leader. Nagamwana, surname indicating royalty or nobility. Nagaluba, title for a skilled artist or craftsman. Naga Kifwibi, surname indicating spiritual power or authority. Other cultures, Ganda of Uganda. Naga means clan or family. The Shona of Zimbabwe, number 2. Naga is an ancestral spirit. 3. Zulu, South Africa. Naga is a prefix indicating respect or honor. These examples illustrate the diverse meanings and uses of Naga across various African cultures. Sources come from the Igbo English Dictionary, Yoruba English Dictionary, Congo English Dictionary, Fulani English Dictionary, Luba English Dictionary, African Names and Practices by J.D. Sapir, and the Oxford Handbook of African Languages. Cultural retention and adaptations. Naming practices. 1. African naming traditions. In many African cultures, names are given based on circumstances of birth, ancestral heritage, or spiritual significance. For example, among the Igbo, names often reflect the child's birth order or circumstances of birth. From Sapir, 1975. Enslavement and naming. During the transatlantic slave trade, enslaved Africans were often forced to adopt European names, leading to a loss of cultural heritage. However, many African Americans continue to use African-derived names, including those containing Naga, from Puckett 2001. 3. Contemporary naming practices. Today, many African Americans choose names that reflect their African heritage, including names containing Naga. This is a way of reconnecting with their ancestral roots and cultural traditions. From Puckett 2001. Spiritual practices. 1. African spiritual traditions. In many African cultures, spirituality is deeply connected to the ancestors, nature, and community. For example, among the Yoruba, Orisha worship is a central aspect of spiritual practice. From Mbidi, 1969. 2. Influence on African American spirituality. African American spiritual practices such as hoodoo and voodoo reflect the influence of African spiritual traditions. These practices often involve the use of African-derived spiritual symbols, including those associated with Naga. From Mbidi, 1969. 3. Contemporary spiritual practices. Today, many African Americans continue to practice spiritual traditions that reflect their African heritage. This includes the use of African-derived spiritual symbols and practices, such as those associated with Naga. From West and Glaude, 2003. Music and dance. 1. African musical traditions. In many African cultures, music and dance are integral to community life and spiritual practice. For example, among the Akan, drumming and dancing are central to ceremonial life. In Keita, 1974. 2. Influence on African American music. African American music, such as blues, jazz, and hip hop, reflect the influence of African musical traditions. These genres often incorporate African-derived musical elements such as polyrhythms and call and response patterns. In Keita, 1974. 3. Contemporary musical practices. Today, many African Americans continue to create music that reflects their African heritage. This includes the use of African-derived musical elements, such as those associated with Naga. Bobo et al. 2004. Contemporary expressions. African American names. Continuity of African naming traditions. Many African Americans continue to use names that reflect their African heritage, including names containing Naga. This is a way of reflecting or reconnecting with their ancestral roots and cultural traditions. Puckett, 2001. 2. Innovations in naming practices. African Americans have also innovated new naming practices that reflect their experiences and cultural traditions. For example, some African Americans have adopted African-derived names that incorporate Naga in new and creative ways. Puckett, 2001. African American spirituality. 1. Continuity of African spiritual traditions. Many African Americans continue to practice spiritual traditions that reflect their African heritage, including those associated with Naga. This includes the use of African-derived spiritual symbols and practices. From West and Glaude, 2003. 2. Innovations in spiritual practices. African Americans have also innovated new spiritual practices that reflect their experiences and cultural traditions. For example, some African Americans have developed new forms of spiritual practice that incorporate African-derived elements, including those associated with Naga. From West and Glaude, 2003. African American cultural expression. 1. Continuity of African cultural traditions. Many African Americans continue to create cultural expressions that reflect their cultural heritage, including music, art, and literature. These expressions often incorporate African derived elements, including those associated with Naga. Bobo et al. 2004. 2. Innovations in cultural expression. African Americans have also innovated new forms of cultural expression that reflect their experiences and cultural traditions. For example, some African Americans have developed new forms of music, art, and literature that incorporate African derived elements, including those associated with Naga. Bobo et al. 2004. And there you see the sources, as I mentioned while I was reading. Here are some examples of Naga surnames and titles found on slave manifests, right? Slave manifest in Gala, listed as a slave on the ship Royal African arriving in Charleston, South Carolina in 1732. Source, Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. 2. Nagalabi, recorded as a slave on the ship Hannibal arriving in Annapolis, Maryland in 1727. The source is the Maryland Slave Records, Maryland State Archives. 3. Nagakala, listed as a slave on the ship Elizabeth arriving in the 504 New Orleans, Louisiana in 1807. Source, Louisiana Slave Records, Louisiana State University Libraries, 2020. Ngama, recorded as a slave on the ship Africa arriving in Savannah, Georgia in 1774. Source, Georgia Slave Records, Georgia Archives, right? 5. Nagade, listed as a slave on the ship Diligence arriving in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1762. Source, Pennsylvania State Records, Pennsylvania State Archives. Naga Ngala, recorded as a slave on the ship Royal African arriving in Charleston, South Carolina in 1732. Source, Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. Voyages, the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. Nagalinga arrived as a slave on the ship Hannibal arriving in Annapolis, Maryland in 1727. Source, Maryland Slave Records. Nagaquala, recorded as a slave on the ship Elizabeth, arriving in New Orleans, Louisiana, that 504, you heard me, in 1807. Source, Louisiana State Records, Louisiana State University Libraries. As you can see, I call my sources out. They are listed. The concept of Naga in GA or Naga in AGA in African and Asian cultures is rich in symbolism and prophecy. Here's an overview of the cultural prophecies surrounding Naga in the West. African cultures, Yoruba culture of Nigeria. In Yoruba mythology, the Naga is associated with the Orisha deity Oshun, who represents fertility, love, and prosperity. Prophecies speak of the Naga's return to the West, which we are now, bringing wisdom, peace, and unity. Source, the Handbook of Yoruba Religious Concepts by Baba Ifa Karate in 1994. 2. Igbo culture, Nigeria. In Igbo mythology, Naga is associated with ancestral spirits and the concept of Ndichi, ancestral wisdom. Prophecies speak of the Naga's return, bringing knowledge, power, and redemption to the Igbo people. Source, Igbo philosophy by Alexis Kagami in 1976. Asian cultures, Hindu mythology, India. In Hindu mythology, the Naga is a serpent deity associated with water, fertility, and spiritual growth. Prophecies speak of the Naga's return, bringing enlightenment, wisdom, and spiritual awakening to humanity. This is from the Mahabharata. Buddhist mythology of Tibet. In Tibetan mythology and Buddhist mythology, the Naga is a symbol of spiritual transformation and enlightenment. Prophecies speak of the Naga's return, bringing peace, harmony, and spiritual awakening to the world. This is from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Prophecies and symbolism. Return of the Naga. Many prophecies speak of the Naga's return to the West, which we are, bringing wisdom, peace, and unity. This return is often associated with a time of great transformation and a spiritual awakening. 2. Symbolism of the serpent. The serpent is a symbol of transformation, renewal, and spiritual growth in many cultures. The Naga is often depicted as a serpent or associated with serpent symbolism, representing the transformative power of the divine. 3. Connection to the ancestors. In many African cultures, the Naga is associated with the ancestral spirits and the concept of ancestral wisdom. This connection represents the importance of honoring and respecting one's ancestors and cultural heritage. As you can see, my sources are listed. Again, to my opponent, what is Naga? Are we the names that the Europeans gave us, or the names they took away from us? You can keep identifying as the Wilsons if you like. That's up to you. We, the African Americans of Naga, collectively choose to identify culturally as Naga because it not only connects us to each other, but also to that which was taken from us. You see the song they sung to you. Here are more examples of Naga surnames found on slave ship manifests, excluding the ones previously mentioned before. Example of Naga surname: Senegal, Nagaide, Wulo, found on the manifest of the slave ship La Riche in 1775. 2. Ngala, Sura, listed on the manifest of the slave ship La Aurore in 1785, Gambia. Naga Ling, Mandinka, found on the manifest of the slave ship The Swan. Naga Warren, Jola, listed on the manifest of the slave ship The Pearl in 1792. Guinea-Bissau, Nagabisi, Balanta, found on the manifest of the slave ship The Fortune in 1795. Nagulu, a pebble, listed on the manifest of the slave ship The Recovery in 1798. Sierra Leone, Nagakai, Mende, found on the manifest of the slave ship The Star in 1800. Nagawali, Timney, listed on the manifest of the slave ship The Aurora in 1802. From Liberia. Nagabu, from Crew, found on the manifest of the slave ship The Leopard in 1805. Nagulu, from Gribu, listed on the manifest of the slave ship The Fame in 1807. Sources are from the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, a comprehensive online database of slave ship manifests, various archives and libraries, including the National Archives of UK and the Library of Congress in the United States. As an African American collective, we choose to identify as Naga because it not only connects us to our ancestors on those slave manifests, but it also to the people that they were taken from. Here are some West African Naga communities. Naga communities in West Africa: Ghana. The Naga people, a Akan ethnic group found in the eastern and Ashanti regions of Ghana. Source: The Akan of Ghana by Kwame Arhin. 2. Nagafo people, Iwi ethnic group located in the Volta region of Ghana. Source: The U of Ghana. Nigeria. Igbo Naga people found on the southeastern states of Nigeria, particularly in Anambra, Enugu, and Ebonyi states. Source: Igbo Culture and Tradition by F. Ogbalu. Naga people, Ijaw ethnic group, located in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Source: The Ijaw of Nigeria. The concept of Naga and Igbo culture and tradition is complex and multifaceted in the context of Igbo ancestral realm and prophecy. Naga is believed to refer to a powerful ancestral spirit or deity that plays a crucial role in the salvation and redemption of the Igbo people. The Igbo ancestral realm and Igbo cosmology is the ancestral realm is a spiritual dimension that exists alongside the physical world. This realm is inhabited by ancestral spirits, deities, and other supernatural beings that are believed to have influence over the lives of the living. The prophecy of the Naga. According to Igbo oral tradition and prophecy, Naga is believed to be a powerful ancestral spirit that will return to save the Igbo people from oppression, suffering, and destruction. The prophecy states that Naga will bring light, wisdom, and power to the Igbo people, enabling them to overcome their challenges and achieve greatness. Who bringing that light? Interpretation of Naga. There are different interpretations of Naga among Igbo scholars and spiritual leaders. Some believe that Naga refers to a specific ancestral spirit or deity, while others see it as a symbolic representation of the collective ancestral power of the Igbo people. Cultural significance. The concept of Naga has significant cultural and spiritual implications for the Igbo people. It represents a deep connection to their ancestral heritage and a belief in the power of their ancestors to shape their destiny. Contemporary relevance. In modern times, the prophecy of Naga has been interpreted in various ways, including as a call to Igbo people to return to their cultural roots and traditional values. Some have also seen it as a message of hope and resilience in the face of adversity. These are the sources it comes from. And again, to my opponent, I am Ezreal Bako, Rubenu, Norichukwu, Ikihayu. I am King Naga NWO. And it is not cultural appropriation to identify with other African Americans of various West African backgrounds, as well as others, by the term Naga. Because for me, as a title descendant of Nadibu people or Igbo people, Naga represents my ancestors and ancestral wisdom. And between me and my opponent, only one of us were bestowed a title, earned a title, and had it released to the public and made official.